In a quiet house in the late 1940s, a strange and frightening story unfolded. A boy named Robbie Mannheim started experiencing weird things in the night, and soon it would turn into a terrifying situation known as the exorcism of Roland Doe. As rumors of a demonic presence spread, a desperate plea for help led to a spine-chilling confrontation with supernatural forces. Get ready for a journey into the mysterious, where the line between good and evil becomes unclear and a battle for a young soul captures the hearts of those who are trying to help. This is the eerie tale behind the real-life events that inspired the movie The Exorcist, which honestly, in my opinion, the real story is even more terrifying than what happens in the movie. So my name is Jennifer. Welcome to Whispers of the Unseen. Be sure to like this video if you enjoy it, if you learned something. Subscribe so you don't miss out on any more videos like this one. So let's get started. One of the priests who performed the exorcism, Raymond Bishop, kept a daily diary of the exorcism because he believed it could be helpful to people in the future. There were almost 40 witnesses of the different stages of Roland's possession, and what do you know? They match Raymond Bishop's diary, which adds reliability to the diary. We'll be referring to the boy as Roland Doe, which honestly, it took me a long time to realize that pseudonym was like Roland Doe. I just thought it was Roland Doe. Let me know what you think, because maybe it was just me. But yeah, we'll be referring to him as Roland Doe because that is what he was referred to as for so long as a pseudonym. And it wasn't revealed until after he passed away that his real name was Ronald Edwin Hunkeler. Not 100% sure how you say that. I'm sorry, I'm not good with pronunciations. After he passed in 2020, a relative of his came forward announcing his real name and identified him as a former NASA engineer. But for this podcast, like I said, we'll be referring to him as Roland, and all of the family members involved will be also referred to by pseudonyms. So Roland was a 13-year-old boy and an only child. He was very much a normal boy who went to school and had friends. People did say that he was pretty quiet, but that he could also be hyper. He lived with his parents and his grandmother. The parents and grandmother were extremely religious. He was close with his family, but was particularly close with his Aunt Harriet, who they called Aunt Tilly. Aunt Tilly had a huge passion for spiritualism, so the opposite of what the rest of the family believed. She believed in ghosts, communication with the dead, tarot cards, all those things. She ended up getting a Ouija board. Roland and Tilly would bond over the use of it as they would try and connect with deceased relatives. They would spend a lot of time messing around with the board. Also, Roland was said to have spent hours playing with the board by himself, which, in case you don't know, that's a big no-no. Ouija boards in general should be a big no-no, but especially not by yourself. And it's my opinion, and lots of others, that this was the start of the whole experience. You cannot control who or what comes in on Ouija boards, so it's best to not have anything to do with them. It all began at the family's home in Maryland on Saturday evening, January 15th, 1949. Roland's parents were out of the house, so he was left at home with his grandmother. Him and his grandmother began to hear what sounded like very loud dripping noises, like coming from a faucet, so they checked every sink and tub in the house, and they were all dry. After continuing to search, they finally could tell that it was coming from the grandmother's bedroom. It seemed to be coming from the attic above the grandmother's bedroom. They then noticed a photograph hanging on the wall of Jesus began shaking, as if someone were on the other side of the wall banging on it as if trying to knock it down, which obviously would freak anyone out. But it didn't stop there. They began hearing what sounded like scratching coming from the floorboards from underneath the grandmother's bed. This scratching would continue for days. The parents thought it was possibly a mouse or a rat and planned to call an exterminator, but the exterminator, when he came, he found no signs of rodents. He even ripped up the floor underneath the bed and put some rat poison out. But again, he saw no nests, poop, any signs that would be indicating that a rodent had been there. To make things even more strange, the scratching had a set schedule. Yeah, it would start every night at 7 p.m. and stop just after midnight. It would even get louder if they stomped on the floor. This would continue for 11 days. Then the noises moved from the grandmother's room to Roland's room. Instead of the scratching coming from under the floors, he described what he heard as being squeaky shoes walking up and down the side of his bed. During this time, the 26th of January, only 54 years old, Aunt Tilly had passed away from multiple sclerosis complications. With Roland having such a connection with Aunt Tilly, he was devastated at her passing. There was one night after her passing that Roland, his grandmother, and mother were all staying in his bed in his bedroom. While all three were lying there, they hear the strangest sound. It sounds like troops marching across the floor towards the bed, pacing the length of the mattress and back again. And they are, for good reason, terrified. Suddenly, the grandmother shouts out, "If you are Tilly, knock 3 times." They then felt 3 waves of air rush past them, which then produced 3 knocks on the floor beneath them. She asked again, "If you're Tilly, tell me positively by knocking 4 times." And this time they felt 4 more gusts through the air and heard 4 more knocks. Then claw marks appeared on the inside of the mattress, as if something was in there clawing up. Then the mattress began to shake, and then it became more violent. Suddenly, the edges of the bedspread stretched out and began to float. The mother cautiously reached out and touched the stiff sheets, and it just completely fell right back into place. But they continued to hear the claws scratching from the inside of the mattress, and it would continue until after midnight. And this would happen for weeks. Eventually, things would get even more strange, if you can believe that. A Bible flew off a bookcase, a pear and an orange flew across the room, a rocking chair that he was sitting in began to spin around uncontrollably. Things were even beginning to happen at his school. His desk would seem to just slam randomly into other desks all by itself. Books would fly off his desk. His parents and teachers think he is possibly doing all of this himself, acting out for attention after the death of his aunt, but it gets so bad that he eventually stops going to school altogether. Roland promised he was not the one doing all of the strange things. His parents even admitted they didn't see how he would have been able to do some of the things that had been happening. Once Roland was sitting in a rocking chair, and it lifted off the ground and flipped over with him in it. Trying to prove that Roland himself did it, his dad tried to repeat the trick, but it was too heavy for him to even lift the chair. The uncle did the same thing. As they were doing this, a vase started to float off of the table. It flew through the air and smashed into the wall. I mean, if that wasn't enough of a giveaway, something was clearly wrong here, and I would have been out weeks and weeks ago. Things only continued to get worse for Roland at home. He could never get a good night's sleep because he would wake up shaking, contorting, and just thrashing around on the bed. When he would sleep, he would talk in his sleep, but the things that he said were terrible and not something that Roland would normally say. He would also be speaking in a voice that was not his own and barking like a dog. He was doing this so loudly that even the neighbors could hear this happening. At this time, he was also becoming withdrawn and depressed. Things continued to progress. He began getting scratches on his own body that would appear out of nowhere. His parents even witnessed the scratches appearing on his body. Some scratches are even on areas of his back where it would be impossible for him to reach himself. His parents sent Roland to different professionals: psychiatrists, psychologists, pediatrician, Lutheran minister. All of the doctors said that he appeared fine, but Roland's problems would only continue to get worse. Reverend Schultz was contacted, and he thought it could possibly be the result of poltergeists messing with Roland. Because poltergeists do not typically move from house to house, the Reverend offered to let Roland come stay with him to see if anything would happen at his home. Roland's parents were fine with this, and it sounds a little odd, but they were fine with it. During the day, Roland was a perfectly normal boy, having normal conversations, and then at night, however, Schultz and Roland slept in the same room in twin beds. Roland's mother was also there, but she slept in a separate room. Around midnight, Schultz woke up to Roland's bed vibrating and shaking. Schultz told him he should leave the bed and go sit in the armchair in the corner of the room. When he did, the shaking stopped. After a few moments in the chair, it began to slowly lean to one side until Roland fell completely off. As he fell, Schultz said it appeared as if Roland was in some sort of a trance. The Reverend tried to recreate what had happened with the chair, but it was too heavy for him to be able to tip over like that. Schultz began to pray over Roland, and this just really seemed to upset whatever entity this was that was having control over Roland, because scratches began to appear on his body once again. Schultz decided to try something different. He grabbed a few blankets and told Roland to just lay on the floor because there would be no chair to tip over, no mattress to shake, and this seemed like the only option. However, at 3 a.m., which if you don't know, it's not a good hour in the paranormal world, his blanket, with Roland still laying on it, began to slide across the floor. It even dragged him under one of the beds. Then Roland's body began to bounce up into the bed springs above him. He repeatedly smacked into the bed springs, but Roland seemed unfazed. Finally, Schultz pulled Roland and the blankets out from under the bed, and he noticed Roland had bloody scratches all over his face from repeatedly smacking into the bed springs. Schultz was completely baffled at what was happening with Roland. But because he was a Lutheran minister, he recommended they contact a Catholic priest because Catholics know more about this type of stuff. Before he could see a Catholic priest, Roland began to get these red scratch marks on his body, some even seemingly writing out letters. They take Roland to see a young Catholic priest named Father Hughes. He was only 29 years old. It was said later that when Roland came into the priest's office, the temperature in the room immediately dropped. Roland gave off an aura of evil, his phone slid along the desk seemingly by itself, and Roland was being very inappropriate saying things to the priest. He also heard Roland speak in a language that Roland did not even know, which, if you don't know, that's a classic sign of possession. He was saying things like, "O priest of Christ, you know that I am the devil. Why do you keep bothering me?" After spending a bit of time with Roland's father, Hughes told the parents that he was definitely possessed, and not just by any old demon, but the devil himself, believing that he accidentally opened up a door by using the Ouija board. They immediately began the process of getting Roland an exorcism. Hughes had Roland admitted to a Catholic hospital under a fake name, thinking that it would be easier to go through with the exorcism in the presence of nuns and orderlies instead of at home. On March 6, 1949, Father Hughes attempted an exorcism. They strapped Roland's arms and legs to the hospital bed, but while the father was reciting prayers in Latin, things came to a sudden stop when Roland manages to get free of one of the restraints. With the free arm, he grabs a spring from the bed and slashes Father Hughes' arm. Father Hughes' arm all the way down from his left shoulder to his wrist. He was gushing with blood and stumbled out of the room while the orderlies continued to hold down Roland. Father Hughes would end up needing over 100 stitches, and he was never able to regain full use of his left arm. It said after this happened, he changed. He became withdrawn from the church, he got blood poisoning, and continued to have issues with the arm for the rest of his life. After this, he refused to attempt another exorcism, and can you blame him? Bloody scratches would appear on Roland's body nightly. Eventually, it began to spell out words. One of those nights, the word Lewis suddenly appeared on his body right across his chest. So his parents thought this was a sign that to help appease whatever entity was torturing Roland, that it could stop if they went to St. Louis. In March of 1949, the family took a train to St. Louis. However, nothing changed. The bed shaking, the scratches, it all continued. But now there were even more witnesses than just the parents and grandmother seeing what was happening to Roland. He had numerous aunts, uncles, and cousins all seeing the terrifying stuff that was happening to Roland. One of the cousins decided to go to their college professor, Raymond Bishop, who would later write the diary, and explain what was happening with Roland and wondered if he could be able to help in any way. The bishop arrived at the home, skeptical, but after witnessing the events for himself, he immediately called for reinforcements. He reached out to a Jesuit priest called Father Bowdern comes to the home and says prayers over Roland and gave the home a blessing, sprinkling Roland's bed with holy water and pinning a small religious relic to the pillow. But nothing out of the ordinary seemed to be happening at the moment. But of course, once dark came, that is when things began to get strange again. Everyone downstairs hears a loud thud, which turns out to have been a bottle of holy water being flung across the room and hit a wall. Also, a very heavy bookshelf had moved across the room and had spun around to face the other direction. They see Roland lying still on the bed as the mattress violently shakes. The bishop sprinkled holy water on the bed, which made the mattress stop shaking. But as soon as he left the room, the mattress began shaking again. So everyone went back into Roland's room. Roland began screaming and lifting up his shirt, and right in front of their eyes, zigzag scratches began forming on Roland's chest. It looked as if the scratches were coming from the inside of his body, and it was something trying to scratch its way out. Bishop realized he was in way over his head, so he reached out to the Archbishop of St. Louis to let them know that this boy needs an exorcism. But the bishop let them know that he didn't know much about them and that he had not been trained to perform one. So basically, he was asking for them to approve the exorcism and to send out someone more knowledgeable on the subject. The Archbishop said there could be an exorcism performed, but that Bishop needed to be the one to do it. The Archbishop also wanted everything to be kept secret. Bowden refused because he had no interest in confronting a demon. He didn't think he could do it, but it was Bowden who had to do it. On Wednesday, March 16th, the priests did everything they needed to do to prepare for an exorcism. They prayed, fasted, made confessions, and went to visit Roland. It was just after 10 p.m. when the exorcism began. Bowden began to pray over Roland. It didn't take long for the crazy stuff to start going down. Roland's mattress began to shake. Bowden continued to pray for 2 hours, but the shaking of the mattress continued. Finally, Bowden gave the most powerful part of the prayer, where he directed the demon directly, saying, "I command thee, unclean spirit." Roland screamed and yanked open his pajamas top, just in time for them to see 3 red welts to appear across his stomach. Bowden continued to pray, but whenever he would say things like "Lord," fresh welts would appear on the boy's body. Roland claims that it feels like thorns being dragged across his skin. Soon his whole body was covered. Arms, legs, back, everything. Some of the welts appeared to look more like he was being branded from the inside of his body. There's also what looked like an image of a devil that appeared on his leg. Bowden commanded the demon to tell him its name as well as when it would leave Roland. Suddenly, the word hell appears across his body. Bowden continued to shout, demanding to know his name and when he will leave. As he did, a couple more letters formed on the boy's stomach, G-O. On his leg appeared the Roman numeral X, which means 10. So what did this mean? It would leave in 10 days, hours? Bowden continued to pray, addressing and casting out the demon. Roland's eyes were closed, but his body continued to contort and thrash on the bed. They had to hold him down on the bed. He spit at Bishop and Bowden. They continued to pray, make the image of the cross over his body and wounds, sprinkling holy water. Suddenly, his body went still, his eyes closed. And guys, this is what really freaked me out. Not that everything else hadn't already freaked me out, but this is what really sticks with me. Roland then sat up in bed, completely stiff, his eyes were closed, and he began to sing, "Way Down Upon the Swanee River." He stretched out his arms and began to sway to the music. Oh my God. The longer he continued, the quicker and louder his voice got, until it sounded like it was nothing more than gibberish. Prayers continued, but when they began praying to St. Michael the Archangel, Roland becomes enraged. And if you don't know, St. Michael is depicted as the epitome of good versus evil. Roland became extremely violent, the most violent they had ever seen him. He began punching his headboard and his pillow with what Bishop described in the diary as more than ordinary strength. They sprinkle him once more with holy water, and Roland appears to wake up. When he wakes up, he says he has been fighting a big red devil that he says is slimy and powerful. He then seems to go back into his violent fit. It took 2 men to restrain him. Finally, around 7:30 in the morning, Roland finally seems to just pass out into a relaxing sleep. He doesn't wake up until after 1 p.m., and he had no memory of what happened the night before. He would play Monopoly with his family during the day as if everything were normal, and this would just continue to happen day after day. Sometimes Roland would fall into a trance-like sleep, his body thrashing, spitting, urinating himself, and claiming that the urine burned his skin, snapping his teeth. Sometimes he would sing, songs he'd never even heard of, by the way, and his voice would also be in perfect pitch. Roland was fully and completely possessed. The demon, through Roland, would begin to grin and laugh at the priests. The laugh was described as diabolical, wild, and idiotic. Roland eventually throws up, which is a sign of the demon leaving the body. So they believe it's gone, so they go back home. A little too soon, a little too quick. Only to be called back just a couple of hours later because Roland is once again thrashing and screaming, "He's back, he's back." Then it was night 9. After being given the Roman numeral X, they think that this could mean that this is the end. They think that this could mean that this is the end of it all. So Bowden decided to have that night's exorcism in the quarters at the rectory. Unfortunately, this would be one of the worst nights. Roland is now the strongest he has ever been. It takes 3 men to hold him down. He ended up breaking free and punching one of the fathers in the nose, breaking it. They said he was so full of gas that his stomach was swollen. They said that the smell of it was so bad that even though it was freezing cold outside, they had to have all of the windows open. He continued to say horrible things to the priest. The demon warned specifically to one of them, "You will be with me in hell," in 1957. Around 2:30 a.m., the demon spoke right to Bowdern and said, "You like to stay with me? Well, I like it too." The session was complete for the night, and Roland fell into a deep sleep. The next night, the 10th night in a row of exorcisms, they also performed it at the rectory. Normally, when Bowdern would use words like Lord or God, Roland would always have a physical reaction, but that didn't happen this night. None of the taunting, urinating, singing. He just thrashed around in the bed until he fell asleep. The next morning, Bowdern sent Roland home, thinking that this could be the end of it all. Nothing happened for 4 nights, but on Thursday, around 11:30 p.m., Roland told his mother he felt sick. He begged for everyone to come up to the bedroom with him. He sat and then his eyes closed. He started moving his fingers across the bedsheet as if he were writing something. Then in a flat tone he said, "I will stay 10 days, but will return in 4 days. If you stay and become a Catholic, it will stay away. You may not believe me. Then Roland will suffer forever." It had taken 10 days to exorcise the demon, and now 4 days later it had returned. Bowdern knew he had no other choice but to baptize Roland. The car ride on the way to the baptism, Roland once again fell into a trance state. The demon said in a very deep voice, especially for a 13-year-old boy, "So you think you're going to baptize me and that you think you will drive me out with Holy Communion?" Then Roland continuously laughed, charging forward from the back seat, grabbing the steering wheel, making the car go off the road. The uncle who was driving immediately pulled the emergency brake before they had a wreck. Roland then looked at his mother, grabbed her by the neck, and tried to strangle her. It took several men to get him off of her. It takes 3 men to drag him into the church. He is contorting, spitting, just going crazy, and this baptism just seemed to make whatever was inside of him even more angry. The communion took 5 attempts. As soon as he did, he completely changed, calm and awake. That night they performed another exorcism, and at the part where the priest asked what day and hour it would part, 18, the Roman numeral 18 appeared on his leg. April 18th, 16 days away. Could they even hold on that long? The next 2 weeks at night, Roland's body would be covered in bloody scratches. As they got closer to April 18th, the demon seemed stronger than ever. A witness even noted that his appearance changed. His stomach descended, and his features were so distorted that he didn't even look like the same person anymore. They put Roland into a hospital. Then, finally, on April 18th, when Bowdern entered the hospital room that night, he came with a new tactic. Instead of yelling in Latin, he would instead speak calmly in English. Whenever Roland was out of his trance, he would clutch his crucifix and pray. When he was in the trance, he continued as he had been, full of anger, spitting at the priest's face. And finally, that night, Bowdern commanded the demon to leave. Roland's body contorted so extremely that they said his shoulders almost touched the bottom of his feet. At 10:45 p.m., Bowdern wrapped up the prayer. Before he continued, he realized there was a quiet in the room. Suddenly, there was a brand new voice that appeared that was so powerful. "Satan, I am Saint Michael, and I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave. Leave the boy in the name of Dominus." Oh. Okay, that's strange. My camera just cut off. Okay. We're almost done, so pray. Okay, well, let's see. He was asking the evil spirits to leave the body in the name of Dominus. Immediately, now. Roland's body then fell back, twisting and contorting for about 10 minutes, but then it stopped. Remember we talked about St. Michael the Archangel earlier? Yeah, he stepped in. The thrashing and contorting stopped. Roland is suddenly normal and smiles and says he's gone. He then goes on to explain what happened to him when he was in the trance. He said he was standing outside of a cave when he saw a beautiful-looking man in a robe, flowing wavy hair blowing in the wind. He's covered in light and he has a huge fiery sword. When he sees Roland, he points towards the cave for Roland to look. When he does look in the cave, he sees the devil. He looks back, who is obviously St. Michael the Archangel, and St. Michael smiles at him and begins to speak, but the only word that Roland can really remember from the conversation is Dominus. This is a Latin word that means Lord. He then saw all of the demons run into the cave with the devil, and suddenly bars appeared over the entrance of the cave. On the bars were letters, and it spelled out the word spite. As they were listening to what Roland is saying, Bowden is obviously skeptical that the devil's actually gone. I mean, it had been weeks at this point, so he just prays to God that if this is actually over and the devil is really gone, to please give him a sign. And according to multiple witnesses that were also at the hospital, at that moment, there was a very loud boom you could hear throughout the whole building. Also, there were multiple reports of a huge glowing image of St. Michael seen in the chapel of the hospital at the time of the boom. This was enough clarification for Bowden to realize that it was finished. The devil was gone. For a few weeks, the priests, Roland, and his family were obviously a little bit on edge just to make sure that it was actually gone. So they all stayed in St. Louis just in case. After a few weeks, Roland and his family went back to their home in Maryland. Bowden kept the details of the exorcism a secret. He sent the bishop's diary to the archdiocese to be kept on file in case anyone in the future may experience something similar. And remember Schultz? He wasn't so quiet, though. He gave a lecture on the subject, and he felt it was very important for him to share what he had seen. Local papers wrote up the lecture, and this is what author William Peter Blatty used for his book, The Exorcist. Roland would grow up to live a normal life. He got married, which, by the way, Father Bowden married him. He had kids. He was a scientist working with NASA. Now, none of this came out until after he had passed away. Like I said earlier, someone close to him came out in 2020 after he passed away. He was always worried that his NASA coworkers would find out that his experience is what inspired the movie The Exorcist. He never had any other supernatural experiences. My personal opinion, it was real. It happened. He was possessed and he was saved. There were way too many witnesses, over 40, and documents saved from reliable people. One thing, too, that makes me believe it is true is the real Roland Doe never spoke out. He could have made so much money off of interviews, but he wanted his privacy, and honestly, probably didn't want to talk about what happened to him. I mean, would you? I'd be scared talking about it would make something come back. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think he was legitimately possessed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on other videos like this one. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you next time.